Revenge with Karen. I knew something was off the second my infusion nurse's face froze mid-scan. "Your insurance is inactive," she whispered, like she was telling me I had a ghost growing out of my neck. I still had the Roman 4 halfway in my arm, Remicade dripping like liquid gold into my bloodstream, when the clinic staff wheeled over a laptop and showed me the denial code. Coverage terminated, employer plan canceled. I hadn't even finished my goddamn treatment. 30 minutes later, I was in my car, eyes dry but hands shaking, gripping the wheel like it owed me rent. My phone buzzed with a calendar invite, budget review Rick B., scheduled 10 minutes earlier. I didn't even get the decency of a heads up, just a backward slap in the form of a Teams ping. Rick looked like every rejected Lego figurine, square jaw, beady eyes, smug enough to think Axe body spray is a signature scent. Didn't even look at me when I walked into the conference room. Just kept fiddling with his dumb stainless steel water bottle like he was in a hostage negotiation with hydration. "We've had to make some hard choices," he said, already halfway through the sentence like the opening didn't matter. "Effective immediately, we've discontinued premium-tier health coverage for non-executive roles." Necessary measure. Non-executive roles. That was me. Operations Analyst Roman 3. A fancy way of saying I made everyone else's job possible while being utterly disposable. I asked, calmly, at first, what that meant for my infusion treatments, the ones that kept me out of a wheelchair and breathing on my own. He blinked, then said, "I understand this is personal, but we're trying to protect the company long-term. You can re-enroll via Cobra if that helps." Cobra. In the paperwork, HR had already misplaced the last time someone got laid off and tried to get coverage for their kids' epilepsy meds. As in good luck, hope you like calling fax numbers in 2025. I left without yelling, not because I'm composed, but because rage had vacuumed the oxygen from my lungs. I walked out of that glass box carrying my purse, my dignity, and a crumpled prescription for 8 mg of Not Today, Satan. That's when it hit me. 97% of you are probably hearing this while scrolling. No follow, no like, just vibes. And hey, I get it, stories are cheaper when they're free. But if this one slaps you like it slapped me that day, hit the like button. Maybe even subscribe. It's free, unlike my damn Remicade. Anyway, back to the part where my life turned into a corporate horror film written by Kafka after a head injury. Sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes, watching an oil stain under my car slowly morph into a Rorschach test. It looked like a screaming rabbit, or maybe a middle finger. Whatever it was more empathetic than Rick. My phone lit up again, this time an email from HR titled Update, Benefits Realignment. I didn't even open it. The PDF was probably full of faux therapist language like wellness pivot and streamlined care solutions. They didn't know what Rick, with his dumb finance degree and his laminated desk calendar, never thought to consider, was that I was the one who built the vendor database. The one who flagged cost anomalies in procurement before they ballooned into 6-figure losses. I'd seen the invoices, the kickbacks buried in line items labeled logistics margin offsets. I'd been keeping quiet, watching it all pile up, archiving everything just in case the day ever came. Well, Rick, congratulations, you just lit the fuse. I drove home on fumes, both emotional and literal. The gas light had been on since Tuesday, but I hadn't had time to fill up. Too many spreadsheets. Too many back-to-back meetings with sales teams who thought cost of goods was a vibe, not a metric. I got home, opened my laptop, and typed 3 words into a hidden folder buried 6 directories deep. Initiate case file. I clicked open a spreadsheet titled, Preferred Vendor Pricing Collusion. Do not delete, last modified 3 years ago. Owner me, so no, I didn't break, I didn't cry. Not then, I got to work. The first call to HR went to voicemail. The second, disconnected. By the third, I left a message that sounded suspiciously like a hostage negotiation with myself. "Hi, it's me again. Just wondering where the Cobra paperwork is, since I'm, insured mid-treatment and slowly dying of bureaucracy. Call me back or don't. I'll try Morse code next." No reply. By day 4, my body started aching in the places the meds usually kept quiet. My joints felt like rusted bolts. My vision blurred halfway through typing a grocery list. The processing delay explanation on the HR auto-reply might as well have said, "We hope you die," before the system kicks in. And maybe that was the point. I started rationing my prescriptions like apocalypse beans, called around for bridge insurance. Most plans had a 30-day waiting period unless you sold your soul, firstborn, and credit score. One agent offered a plan with a $6,000 deductible and said, "It's really good for catastrophic events." "Lady," I said, "my immune system is the catastrophe." I hung up, sat in silence, stared at the blank wall above my desk, and my eyes drifted to the black thumb drive in my top drawer. Still taped inside an Altoids tin, labeled in my handwriting from years ago, "Do not plug in unless it's really, really bad." Well, it was worse than bad. It was Rick-level bad. I opened the tin, plugged it in, and there it was, 3 years' worth of encrypted zip files. Password protected, each one with the same naming convention. FY18 vendor irregularities, FY19 internal margin anomalies, FY20 conference reimbursements Bahamas. It started back in 2019. A vendor invoice came across my desk that billed for transportation and customs services on domestic orders. I flagged it. My supervisor, different guy back then, told me to ignore the noise. It's all reconciled in the backend. Backend reconciliation doesn't explain why we were paying a New Jersey supplier Florida-level freight charges for paper towels. Then there were the conferences. Oh, the conferences. Vendors would send 3 reps to a procurement leadership summit in Scottsdale, but the only sessions scheduled were poolside tequila tastings and networking golf. Meanwhile, invoices for joint training initiatives rolled in, coded under strategic development. Guess who approved them? Rick. Before he was Rick the Axe, he was Rick the Rubber Stamp. And the bonuses. Jesus. Every time we saved money on bulk contracts, someone up top got a mysterious performance payout. But those savings, they were usually the result of cutting second-tier suppliers and consolidating with one bloated preferred partner who jacked prices 8% after quarter close. I did what any self-respecting analyst with half a spine and full-blown autoimmune rage would do. I documented it. Quietly. Obsessively. I mirrored Slack messages. I archived old vendor contract PDFs from shared drives before they could be sunset. I even screen-recorded an all-hands meeting where Rick bragged about leveraging pricing convergence without realizing he was basically describing a price-fixing scheme with 2 fingers of bourbon in his hand. At the time, I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I kept it, like a digital panic room. Now, that panic room was my war room. I opened a new folder on my desktop. Whistlecase DOJ prep started cross-referencing dates, matching emails to contracts, matching contracts to bonuses, matching bonuses to people. It was like assembling IKEA furniture, except instead of an Allen wrench, had a rare disease and a pile of receipts soaked in corporate slime. I worked until 3 a.m. My hands hurt, my eyes watered. Somewhere around invoice hash 147, I paused and realized I hadn't thought about the pain in hours. Funny thing about rage, it's better than morphine when it's focused. The next morning, I called the Department of Justice anonymous tip line. Didn't leave my name. Not yet. Just described interstate vendor price collusion affecting federal procurement pricing structures. Gave a burner email. Said I had documentation. They replied within 36 hours. That's when I knew if I was going to survive, if I was going to pay for treatment, buy groceries, and one day maybe take a full breath without it costing me a paycheck, I had to weaponize the one thing they underestimated. My spreadsheets. They thought I was just another cog. Sick cog, disposable. But I was the one who built the machine. And now I was taking the damn thing apart. The morning I decided to go nuclear, I woke up before sunrise, sat at the kitchen table with a chipped mug of instant coffee, and opened a fresh Google sheet like it was a declaration of war. Tabs multiplied like cockroaches. Vendor names, pricing patterns, Rick-approved bonuses, contract language risk terms. Every line item got a date. Every email was categorized by tone. Casual brag, veiled threat, oops, they admitted it. I even had a tab for Slack messages titled Too Dumb to Delete. Spoiler alert, Rick featured heavily. The deeper I dug, the older the rot. Turns out, the scheme didn't start with Rick, it predated him. But he was the perfect middle manager fungus, grew fast in darkness, spread wherever there was weakness, and thrived on rot. I found a 2011 invoice-marked volume adjustment, Q2 settlement, that matched a 2011 bonus for an exec who exceeded savings KPIs. Problem: the vendor's price increased by 6% that quarter. I cross-referenced our supplier pricing with national indices, CMS data, Medicare supply bids, even some hospital procurement benchmarks that were supposed to be locked behind paywalls. Thank God for cached PDFs and one shady subreddit of hospital purchasing managers who vented like pissed-off Yelp reviewers. That's when it hit me like a freight train made of legalese and karma. The company had been overbilling entities that operated under federal healthcare subsidies. Not just shady business, not just unethical, illegal, interstate, federal. I nearly spilled my coffee on the keyboard. Rabbit hole just kept burrowing. Every strategic partnership we signed resulted in vendor exclusivity, followed by sudden pricing spikes. Then the company would balance costs by gutting employee benefits, downsizing mid-tier staff like me, and juicing the bottom line with fake savings they dangled in front of investors like rotten meat in a butcher shop window. That's when I pulled up the Dodge whistleblower reward program. 10 to 30%. That's the bounty range for cases that lead to recovered government funds. And this was textbook. False Claims Act violations tied to Medicare/Medicaid procurement fraud, vendor collusion affecting state-subsidized hospitals, interstate shipments, falsified logistics costs, bribery by invoice. Hell, we had the whole buffet. My hand trembled a little as I scrolled through the instructions. They made it sound so sterile. Submit evidence here. Provide timeline. Scribe financial impact. They didn't have a drop-down for my boss canceled my chemo coverage and accidentally reminded me I'm the reason half your office has a paper trail. I created the master document, Case File Alpha Internal Collusion Evidence Package, 3 encrypted drives, 1 local, 2 mirrored to cloud vaults under dummy shell accounts I'd created back in my freelance IT days. Not because I was paranoid, because I worked in operations. Paranoia was part of the damn job. I added audio files, recordings of meetings where Rick laughed off margin convergence and said we should let the vendors sort out who gets paid first, as long as it comes out clean on our books. I uploaded email threads where finance teams joked about price-fixing bingo. I dropped in screenshots of Slack messages with shushing face emojis when someone questioned the math. Even had a PDF from a conference agenda that was literally a wine-tasting itinerary with a footnote about procurement incentive alignment. By the end of the week, I had a 276-page appendix, a glossary of acronyms, and a color-coded table of executive beneficiaries. Red for direct bonuses, blue for stock awards, green for the ones who'd already retired, gray for the ones who'd mysteriously resigned in Q1 with full golden parachutes. I wasn't just building a case. I was building a missile, and I wasn't aiming for Rick anymore. I was aiming for the board. I backed up everything 3 times, printed 2 physical copies, one in my safe, one hidden in a cereal box at my sister's place. Cinnamon Toast Crunch, nobody checks that one. The fury was still there, boiling quietly under the surface. But now it had scaffolding. Now it had timestamps, invoice numbers, and proof. They wanted me forgotten. A line item, a footnote. Instead, I was about to become their audit trail. Because when they pulled the trigger on my health, they didn't realize they'd handed a loaded gun to the company historian. And I was about to write their eulogy, cell by cell, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. The email subject line was short, polite, and absolutely final. FMLA leave notification effective immediately. No fanfare, no dramatic resignation. Just a well-formatted bomb dropped into Rick's inbox with HR looped in for legal compliance. Due to ongoing medical treatment and recent complications, I wrote, I will be taking federally protected leave. I am unavailable for work-related contact during this time. 5 minutes later, I received the automatic reply from Rick. Noted, get well soon. No follow-up, no concern, no awareness that the engine that kept his procurement clown car from veering off a cliff had just stepped off the ride. By the end of the day, my login credentials were disabled. Slack, gone. Email, frozen. Access to our internal vendor audit portal, revoked. They cut me off so cleanly it was surgical. Except I wanted to be cut off. Let them think I'd crawled away to lick my wounds in peace. Let them believe their little cost-cutting stunt had neutered me. They were high-fiving each other over my vanishing act. I was already 3 steps deeper into the shadows, tightening the noose they'd built themselves. Rick didn't even bother assigning my workload to appear. He promoted Jason. Freakin' Jason, 24 years old, once called an Excel formula a sick hack and had a framed Funko Pop collection next to his dual monitors like it was a personality trait. I trained him. I corrected his margin math, literally stopped him from emailing our actual pricing model to a vendor last spring. Now, he was senior analyst, procurement oversight. God help us. While Jason flailed around trying to understand what a GL code was, I was sipping lukewarm tea in my living room, laptop open, speaking in encrypted chat threads with someone named C. Devlin from a Proton Mail account, who worked, according to their signature, for the Dodge Procurement Integrity Division. C. Devlin didn't ask how I got their contact info, just said, "We've reviewed your initial data. We need to talk." That talk turned into 3, then 5. By the second week of my leave, I had a formal case ID, a digital Dropbox for sensitive materials, and another contact from the Office of the Inspector General who only referred to himself as Mitch. Mitch didn't waste time on chit-chat. First message: "Do you have access to original contract language used in onboarding vendor group 17, specifically clauses from Q1 2015 onward?" I replied with a link titled VG17 Price Trajectory Comparison 2012 to 2020. XLSX and added, "See tab 3, Inflation vs. Claimed Cost Drivers. Enjoy the footnotes." They didn't just want receipts, they wanted blood spatter patterns. Meanwhile, inside the company, everything kept humming. Press releases about record-breaking procurement efficiency. A new round of client testimonials posted to LinkedIn, probably ghostwritten by someone who still thought vendor leverage was a business strategy instead of a felony. Jason published a team update bragging about his streamlined spreadsheet simplification initiative. Translation: he deleted half the tabs and didn't realize they were formulas feeding our audit triggers. Rick started scheduling webinars, real ones, titled things like From Fat to Fit, Trimming the Procurement Waistline. I watched one. He smiled like a televangelist and said, "We've cut bloat without sacrificing operational integrity." I laughed so hard I had a coughing fit, but here's what really got me. No one asked where I'd gone. Not even the people I'd helped onboard, not even the ones I gave vendor cheat sheets to so they wouldn't get embarrassed in budget meetings. Not a single, "Hey, how's your health? You okay?" That's when the last piece of the old me quietly packed its bags and left. No more loyalty, no more hope, no more illusions. I wasn't their teammate. I was their firewall. And now the firewall was gone. So when Rick sent a quarterly email blast saying our team has never been leaner or more aligned, I saved a screenshot. I labeled it Exhibit F Overconfidence Blind Spot, because they didn't even notice I was gone, and that was their first and last mistake. The request came on a Tuesday morning like a gentle shove off a cliff. Please prepare all source materials for formal submission via the SEC and DOJ Joint Secure Channel. Include timelines, point of contact metadata, and any corroborating financial models. Translation: we believe you. Now prove it loud enough for court. I didn't hesitate. Just pushed the tea aside, pulled the blackout curtains shut, and went full bunker mode. 3 terabytes. That's how much truth I packed into that drive. Truth in Excel rows, in CC'd threads at 2:17 a.m., in reimbursement memos labeled MISC. That cost more than my entire year's salary. The drive itself was a little black beast, shockproof, waterproof, encrypted with AES 256. If the government wanted receipts, I was sending them a bloody scrapbook. For the next 96 hours, I barely slept. I relabeled every file with ISO timestamps, created a master index. I color-coded based on impact severity. Red equals federal fraud, orange equals breach of contract, yellow equals ethical violations so pungent they'd peel wallpaper. I stitched it all together like a crime scene collage. Each email, each invoice, fragment of a much bigger mosaic. And yes, I included a bonus folder titled Rick's Greatest Hits Slack Edition. Because if I had to read his LOL let the vendor pat it, we'll just bake it into ops margin face with tears of joy message again, I was going to eat drywall. By day 4, my body had started waving the white flag. The autoimmune symptoms were back in full swing, joints like glass, fatigue so deep it felt subcellular. I moved like an old VHS tape, buffering on dial-up. But I kept going, because this wasn't just for me anymore. It was for the vendor who got pushed out after flagging price hikes. The junior analyst who got quietly laid off when she questioned a line item labeled Executive Wellness Travel. The warehouse guy who tore his ACL after they streamlined safety inspections to cut costs. I hand-labeled the drive with a Sharpie, Truth, indexed, 2010-2023. Then I printed 2 affidavits, one for DOJ, one for SEC. I signed them with hands that barely held steady and slipped them into the box alongside the drive. Couriered it certified, overnight. Signature required. I paid extra for GPS tracking. Watched it move across state lines like a nervous parent watching a kid bike to school for the first time. When it arrived, I got a single confirmation email. Received. Thank you. You will be contacted when further review is complete. No emojis, no small talk, just silence. But this time, the silence didn't feel like a void. It felt like gears turning in the dark. I curled up on the couch afterward and didn't move for 6 hours. I was too tired to think, too sore to sleep. The pain buzzed behind my ribs like static, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in months, I felt useful again. Not team player useful, not thanks for staying late useful, but load-bearing pillar of justice useful. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling for a while, imagining the boardroom when this all finally hit. The confidence, the catered breakfast, the banners that read Q for vision and alignment. And then, one by one, subpoenas like guillotine blades falling in slow motion. I smiled, and then I slept. It started as a blip, barely even news. 4-paragraph article buried halfway down the homepage of Procure Wire Daily. A compliance blog so dry it made C-SPAN look like WrestleMania. Headline: Federal agency investigating possible procurement collusion in mid-market vendor networks. No names. No companies. No specifics. Just enough breadcrumbs to make the guilty choke on their catered quinoa bowls. But I knew, and more importantly, they knew I knew. Within 24 hours, the panic began. I still had friends on the inside. People who knew better than to ask questions, but smart enough to forward screenshots. Slack channels renamed to Temp Project B. Audit folders locked behind 2-factor approvals. A frantic internal memo circulated titled Vendor Relations, Hygiene Reminder of Best Practices. Rick even held a virtual town hall with his trademark smirk half glued to his face. Called the article clickbait and said, "These kinds of investigations happen all the time. Nothing to worry about. We're solid, like wet drywall after a pipe burst." Behind the curtain, execs were sweating. I heard they pulled in external consultants to review compliance exposure. Translation: help us delete evidence before the feds knock. But it was already too late, because the drive had landed. The affidavit request came next. An encrypted email from Devlin, my DOJ contact. Marked urgent, we are preparing formal subpoenas. To proceed, we'll need your signed affidavit confirming the source, context, and integrity of the materials submitted. It wasn't a request. It was the tightening of a noose. I printed the form. Read every line like it was scripture. Signed it slowly, deliberately, with a pen I'd once used to fill out vendor onboarding reports. Funny, that same pen now had the weight of an anvil behind it. My name, my initials, my statement under penalty of perjury that everything I submitted was factual, time-stamped, and unaltered. It wasn't adrenaline I felt after. It was something colder, sharper, like steel being sharpened against bone. Because this wasn't theoretical anymore. The gears were moving. Real agents, real subpoenas, real consequences. And me, I was invisible, off-grid, still on FMLA leave as far as the company was concerned. Just a sick employee getting rest. I watched from the shadows as they squirmed. Jason, my replacement, posted a question in a team Slack about how to retroactively clean up contract approval logs. He got no response. Another exec abruptly canceled a team-building retreat in Napa. Rumor was the lead vendor pulled out due to reputational concerns. Rick stopped smiling in meetings. My friend said he began showing up in the office 2 hours early, as if proximity to the copier would keep the subpoenas at bay. And still, I said nothing. Didn't post, didn't leak, didn't gloat. I waited. Because they hadn't heard the worst part yet. They didn't know that the DOJ had already mapped the interstate implications. That vendor group 17 had contracts tied to Medicaid-funded elder care facilities across 6 states. That those inflated prices bled straight into government reimbursement schedules. This wasn't just about bad ethics. This was about defrauding the U.S. government. With my spreadsheets as Exhibit A, the tremor had started, and the aftershock still building. By mid-April, the office rumor mill sounded more like a funeral procession with jazz hands. Vendors weren't returning calls. Procurement leads started ghosting meetings. 2 of our longtime preferred suppliers quietly delisted their affiliation badges from their websites. And LinkedIn, a graveyard. People scrubbing job titles like sinners purging browser history before Sunday service. I didn't even need insider tips anymore. The panic was bleeding out in real time. Then came the message I'd been waiting for, tucked neatly in a Proton Mail reply chain at 2:14 a.m. We've completed internal review of your affidavit and corroborating materials. DOJ is preparing indictments. You may be contacted for formal testimony. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and it landed like a goddamn thunderclap in my chest. They were moving forward, and I was the fuse they lit. That same week, I got word that Rick fired 2 procurement analysts, quietly, off-cycle. No severance. No HR statement. Just walked them out of the building with the same dead-eyed glare you see on game show losers who guess the wrong price on a microwave. Disloyalty, he called it. One of them was the guy who used to bring me red vines during late-night audits. The other was the only person who ever asked me how my treatments were going. I knew then Rick wasn't just spiraling, he was drowning. And like every corporate narcissist clinging to power, he was willing to drag anyone down with him if it bought him another breath of denial. I stayed off the radar, still technically on leave, still legally protected, but I started preparing for every outcome. I rewrote my will, not out of melodrama, but because it felt like unfinished business, like cleaning a house before you set it on fire, just to make sure the photo albums are safe. I finished my final chemo cycle in silence, the nurse gently tapping my arm to coax a stubborn vein while I stared out the window at a dog chasing a bird it would never catch. I remember thinking, that's Rick right now. Barking at subpoenas, thinking speed can outrun gravity. When I got home that day, the mailbox was stuffed with junk flyers, overdue statements from insurance limbo, and a single cream-colored envelope. No return address. No markings, except for one black stamp in the corner. Federal Disbursement Division Confidential. I stood on the porch, holding it like it might hiss or burn or whisper the future. Inside, one line printed in stark courier font, preliminary eligibility determination complete. Payment initiation pending final procedural clearance, and beneath it a number, 7 figures. I sat down right there on the porch step, still in my hospital socks, shaking, not from excitement, not from relief, but from something deeper, like a tectonic plate finally settling after years of pressure. They were going to pay me for surviving, for noticing, for never shutting up, even when it nearly killed me. But I didn't smile, not yet, because this wasn't over. The last domino hadn't fallen, but it was tilting, and Rick was standing right underneath it, arms crossed, clueless to the shadow growing across his PowerPoint slide. The next shareholder meeting was coming, and the subpoenas, they were already printed. The money landed like a whisper. Not a dramatic chime. No push notification. Just a silent new line in my bank app. Plus $2,104,886.73 US. Department of Treasury whistleblower compensation disbursement. I stared at it the way you stare at a photograph of someone you used to love, numb, distant, like it belonged to another version of me who still gave a damn. There was no champagne, no fist pump, no shopping spree. Just me, a black cup of gas station coffee, a quietly satisfied heartbeat steady as a metronome. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not my lawyer, not even the friend who smuggled me vendor screenshots from inside the office. The truth is, I didn't want celebration. I wanted silence, because silence meant they still hadn't figured it out. Across the country, in a Marriott ballroom with bad lighting and even worse bagels, Rick and the board were doing final sound checks for their annual shareholder meeting. Theme this year? Scaling smart, strategic growth in the modern market. They'd booked a panel, hired a local jazz trio, even printed glossy booklets with Q1 highlights featuring bar graphs that looked like erections drawn in crayon. The press coverage was syrupy sweet. Articles drooled about lean innovation and record-breaking vendor synergies. Rick's LinkedIn banner still showed him in front of a pie chart, smiling like a man who believed his own PowerPoint. We're peacocking, grooming investors, pretending like there wasn't a fire inching up their pant leg. And me? I was 300 miles away, barefoot, sitting on my sister's porch with dirt under my nails and a tray of seedlings beside me. I'd spent the morning gardening, tomatoes, basil, a few stunted peppers that looked like they'd given up halfway through puberty. My laptop sat open on the wicker table, live streaming the shareholder meeting on mute. Rick was front and center, gray suit crisp, tie the color of a midlife crisis. The board flanked him like toothpaste models, all veneers, no backbone. I watched them shuffle note cards, rehearse smiles, toast fake success over crystal glasses filled with overpriced Prosecco. And all the while, the agents were getting into position. Plainclothes. Inside the ballroom already. Badge wallets tucked discreetly in coat pockets. Envelopes bulging with subpoenas, sealed and time-stamped. Every board member had one with their name on it. Some had two. I didn't lift a finger. I didn't send an email. I didn't so much as breathe in their direction. The storm had already been scheduled. My work was done. At 9:57 a.m., Rick leaned into the mic and started his opening remarks. Something about shared vision, resilience, long-term growth. It was corporate babble so stale you could spread it on toast. At 9:58, one of the jazz trio's saxophones squeaked, loud and off-key. Nobody noticed except the agents. That was the signal. At 9:59 a.m., I reached for my tea, glanced at my laptop, and checked the time. Exactly then, Rick's smile faltered. Not because of me, because of the tap on his shoulder, because of the words whispered in his ear, because of the envelope pressed into his hand. I didn't need to see what happened next. I closed the laptop, took a breath so full and clean it almost felt like a new lung, and stood up, letting the sun warm my face like a final answer. Gold tablecloths, crystal flutes, Rick mid-sentence, gesturing at a bar chart like it held divine revelation. The ballroom smelled of citrus polish, artificial optimism, and corporate breath, minty, soulless, expensive. The shareholders smiled. The board clapped politely. Flashbulbs went off. Photographer crouched to get Rick's visionary angle. The jazz trio noodled soft background notes like this was a goddamn wedding toast and not the prelude to a mass indictment. That's when the door at the rear of the ballroom opened. They didn't make a scene. No sirens, no yelling. Just a slow, deliberate entrance, 4 plainclothes agents, crisp suits, neutral expressions. One held a small stack of sealed envelopes like love letters from hell. Rick didn't even see them at first. He was too busy pontificating about vendor trust ecosystems and collaborative efficiency. Then he saw the motion, the small wave of silence sweeping through the room like someone had pulled the fire alarm in slow motion. The first agent approached the table. Erickson Grant, the man said. Rick blinked. Yes. The envelope was handed over without ceremony. Department of Justice. Price-fixing investigation. You've been served. Rick's face drained like someone unplugged his circulatory system. Another agent walked to the CFO, then legal, then the VP of Strategic Partnerships. Envelopes landed like guillotine blades, polite but fatal. The room buzzed, not loudly but frantically like a wasp hive just before impact. Chairs scraped, wine spilled. Phones vibrated against linen napkins, unanswered. Rick tried to speak again. His mic was still on. We're told this wasn't happening, he stammered. A female agent leaned in, voice firm but almost sympathetic. It's happening now. Back at home, I stood in the garden, watching it unfold on mute through the live stream window. No need for sound. I could see it all. Rick's jaw slack. The CFO flipping the envelope over like the second page would offer salvation. One board member walked out mid-sip, champagne still in hand. I turned the volume off entirely. I'd already heard enough from them over the years. I knelt to plant another seedling, basil this time. Hardy, resilient, grows fast when nurtured. My hands sank into the soil, warm and damp. The breeze carried the faintest scent of rosemary and burnt ozone. The laptop stayed open for a minute longer. I didn't need it, just kept it there like a candle on an old altar, flickering down. Then I stood up, closed the tab, stretched. For the first time in over a year, I didn't feel sick. I felt clean. I felt whole. I felt done. They tried to silence me to save $2,000 a month. I billed the truth for $2 million. But the look on Rick's face, that was priceless. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.